Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Quincy, Chair of the Ways and Means Committee. Welcome to the regularly scheduled Ways and Means Committee. I'm joined by committee members Andrew Johnson, Lisa Bender, Councilmember Glidden, Councilmembers Palomisano, and Yang. And obviously we're a quorum of the committee and ready to do the city's business. This afternoon's agenda includes public hearings on the reappointments of Charter Department heads. Patrick Todd as City Assessor, Susan Siegel as the City Attorney. In addition to that, there are 26 items on our consent agenda items today. So for the first of those items, they're from the City Attorney's Office, is to authorize and execute a one-year agreement with Hennepin County Department of Community Corrections for a full-time probation officer to provide active supervision for chronic offenders. The City Clerk's Office brings forward the approval of a resolution establishing the 2014 Minneapolis Board of Appeal and Equalization and appointing the following qualified individuals: Tad Marinick, Paul Grace, Sandy Loescher, Patricia Werner, Jeffrey Larson, Earl Netwall, and Jimmy Fogel as an alternate to serve on the 2014 Minneapolis Board of Appeal and Equalization. The next item is to approve the list of city positions subject to the Statement of Economic Interest filing requirements. The city coordinator seeks approval of resolutions accepting several gifts of travel and related expenses to attend several conferences. Items 6, 7, and 8 are related to the Convention Center and the Target Center renovation. The first of those is to accept the low bid of Advance Terrazzo and Tile Company for an estimated expenditure of $188,000. Furnish and deliver all labor and materials and incidentals necessary for the Visitor Information Center project. Then accepting the low responsive bids for a total estimated expenditures of Convention Center construction projects that are underway from Messenger Construction Company, KMH Erectors, Empire House, and Elliott Contracting Corporation. Item 8 is authorizing the release of the RFP for architect and engineering design services for the Target Center renovation project. This item has a couple of questions that maybe warrant some highlight. I don't know if Mr. Johnson is here. Maybe we can get to you in just a second as I get through the rest of the consent items. But thank you for being here for that. We'll highlight some of the RFP process that includes women and minority-owned businesses, so I'll pull that for a little discussion in a moment. The Finance Department brings forward 2 items. One is the accepting of low bid for JPMI Construction Company for an estimated expenditure of $740,800 to furnish and deliver all labor, materials, and incidentals necessary for the construction of Fire Station 5 and Fire Station number 7 improvement projects. And the 2013 fourth quarter gift acceptance resolution for gifts to the City of Minneapolis valued under $15,000. The Information Technology Department brings forward a number of actions related to the applicant tracking software system with NeoGov for an amount not to exceed $190,000, and with Automon LLC for a 3-year contract extension in the amount of $115,000 for support of the Practice Manager software program for case management, and another contract with PowerTeam Inc. for ongoing customer support for the Microsoft Dynamics Customer Relationship Management System, and increase that contract by $50,000 for a not to exceed total of $115,000 over the life of the contract for support services for Neighborhood and Community Relations Department. From the Mayor's Office, we'll be approving the resolution accepting gifts of a conference participation and related travel expenses for Mayor Hodges and Diane Halsey to participate in the 2014 Education Conference. And items 15 and 16 have been referred by the Executive Committee and are recommended for the 2014 salary adjustments, schedules, rates for appointed employees and non-represented employees of the City of Minneapolis. Items 17, 18, and 19 have been referred by Community Development and Regulatory Services Committee. Item 17 are the actions for the Green Homes North program, Round 3 funding awards, and land sales. approving an award of up to $1,139,608 for development gap funding for the construction of 20 green homes on city-owned vacant lots in North Minneapolis, as submitted by 7 nonprofit developers, and related actions to those 20 different parcels of land for sale and development. Number 18 is accepting Minnesota Housing Finance Agency single-family fall 2013 community revitalization funds, and they need to work on their titles for marketing. It's a mouthful. Totaling $104,350, approving budget appropriations, authorizing grant, subrecipient, and/or disbursement-related agreements, and approval of the contracts with Greater Metropolitan Housing Corporation and Center for Energy and Environment to allow them to administer and originate loans under this program on behalf of the city for the Rehab Support Program. Item number 19 is accepting the low bid of Arbor Barber Inc. for $400,000 for cutting nuisance grass for Minneapolis Regulatory Services Departments. Health, Energy, and Community Engagement Committee referred the approval action to authorize increase to the not-to-exceed amounts for the following selected master contracts, finalized projects through the contract termination on December 31st, 2015, with Minnesota Visiting Nurse Agency, Neighborhood Health Source, and the Family Partnership. The Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee refers to our committee the acceptance of the donation of a used school bus from the Minneapolis School Board to the Minneapolis Fire Department for use in cadet training. Authorize new lease with Hennepin Healthcare Systems, Inc. for use of space within fire stations 15 and 22 for ambulance storage. Authorizing the grant funds and execute agreements with Minnesota Homeland Security and Emergency Management in the amount of $27,800. And to authorize contract agreement with the Minnesota Timberwolves to receive bomb security services for basketball games at the Target Center. Transportation and Public Works Committee has referred items 25, 26, and 27 for consideration. They are related to the 51st Avenue North Street resurfacing project actions, the acceptance of low bid of Sunrem Construction for an estimated expenditure of $64,460 for storm water pond dredging, and the receive and file action for the 2014 paving program. So rather than moving all consent items at once, I wonder if we could return to item number 8, I believe it was, Mr. Johnson, if we could just a couple of highlights and questions on the Target Center renovation project.
Great. Thank you, Chair Quincy,
Sure.
Committee members. Thought I would maybe just go through a quick synopsis and then open up for questions.
Thank you.
So last November, the City Council approved a term sheet for $97 million renovation of the Target Center arena. The renovation is conceived to be a 50-50 partnership between the city, the Minnesota Timberwolves Lynx, and AEG, which is the management company that manages the Target Center for the city. The project will be managed through a design group comprised of 3 members from the Timberwolves Lynx and 3 members from the city. Those designated members for the city are myself as the project manager, our CFO, Kevin Carpenter, and then from AEG, Steve Matson, who is the general manager of the Target Center. There's really 2 main contracts that will be coming through the council for this renovation. They are the architectural and engineering design contract and then the construction manager contract. So today I'm here to get the authorization to release the architectural and engineering design contract request for proposal. The City Council will be represented on the selection team for both of these contracts with Council President Johnson and Council Member Goodman. As part of the project during the term sheet adoption, I'm working close with the Civil Rights Department on creating an equity plan. This was staff direction that was made by Councilmember Glidden. The equity plan for the architectural and engineering design services is really a first of its kind for the city. We haven't done these on large professional services contracts before, and so we're learning a lot. We're in uncharted territory a little bit, but coming up with a really exciting plan going forward that we can use into the future. And really, this is to increase opportunities for MNUCP certified women and minority businesses. We have and will provide outreach for doing this to MNUCP certified WMB businesses. A list of businesses has already been collected and identified, and these businesses will be invited to our pre-proposal conference and tour of the Target Center. And then after that tour, we will have a meet and greet get-together where the larger firms can meet the MNUCP firms and get to know them, so that as they need some subcontractors and as they achieve their goals, they'll have a good list of people to work with. So really throughout the renovation process, we're going to be working through civil rights as they're watching this and helping make sure that the goals are met. And really in the coming weeks, you'll see me back here again to bring forth the construction manager RFP to go out. And again, that construction manager RFP and contract will have an equity plan that is with it also. So really at this point, I'll stop and ask for questions. Karen Francois from Civil Rights is also here if there are specific questions about the equity plan that you have. So I'll open up the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson, for coming. Normally, we're just talking about issuing an RFP for design and architect services. Not really something that's worth highlighting very much, but it was important to me because it was following up to Councilmember Glidden's staff direction last year. And I think that's really a part of what we're trying to do, is to elevate from the public's point of view. And where there's public money involved, we want to make sure that there's equity involved in our hiring practices. So thanks for bringing that forward. Ms. Francois, if you had any comments that you'd like to add, that's fine, but I think it's really appropriate that our Civil Rights Department, City Attorney's Office, Finance Department, and in this case, your role, Mr. Johnson, is to make sure that we're all collaborating to work towards more people in Minneapolis, women and minority-owned businesses participating in that process. So thank you for that. Were there any other questions from committee members? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That being said, I think with all the items on the consent agenda, I'd like to move those forward. Any questions? Okay, all those in favor of those items, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those items carry. Thank you very much. So good, some staff are able to move forward. I think we're going to turn now to the public hearing. We'll do this in two public hearings for the Charter Department Head appointments. We're going to be considering the reappointments by the Executive Committee for a 2-year term beginning January 2nd for Patrick Todd to be appointed position of City Assessor and for Susan Siegel to be the appointed position of City Attorney. I'd like to begin by welcoming Mayor Hodges. This is familiar territory, a Ways and Means Committee, but thank you for joining us, and if you'd like to introduce these appointments, that would be terrific.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And did you want to do them one at a time? For example, did you want me to talk about Patrick Todd and do that hearing and then
Yes.
move on to Susan Siegel?
Yes, if
Great.
you would be able to, I think we'd do Mr. Todd first.
Great.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me in your committee, and this is not familiar territory, I must say. I'm very proud to put forward the name of Patrick Todd for the assessor. I have been working with Mr. Todd for the last 8 years, and they've been 8 tough years. Many of those years were really tough, and he got through it with grace and aplomb in a way that I think many of us would be challenged to do. It was tough internally in terms of our resources for the department, and externally in terms of feedback he would get from folks in the community. And every day he walked in, and every day he's given extraordinary service to the city of Minneapolis, extraordinary service to the people of Minneapolis. And I can't speak for certain, but I am not sure how many times across the country people, when talking about their city assessor, use the word passion. But Mr. Todd has a passion for assessing. I don't know how else to put it. He is very excited about where assessing is going. He is excited about where his industry is. He is a passionate advocate in the community for the work that he does, and he spends a great deal of time out in the community, which has been invaluable again, as we have been going through tough times, it's been invaluable to have him and his staff so available to the people of Minneapolis. I am excited to see what work we can do together moving forward as we head into this recovery. His work is going to be as important or more important than ever. And I look forward to the work that we're going to be able to do together in the future. And I ask you to support Mr. Todd for assessor.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hodges. I think we'll begin, if we could, just to open the public hearing on the appointment of Patrick Todd. Is there anyone here to speak on that item? Anyone? Anyone? I'm supposed to ask 3 times. I've done that. I will close the public hearing. And thank you for your attention for this. Mr. Todd, I'd just like to move forward your appointment formally. And if there's any comments and questions from the committee members, that would be welcome. I think I have closed the public hearing, but officially the public hearing is closed. Now we're open for discussion. Councilmember Glidden.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And as the one other person on this committee who's had an opportunity to work with Mr. Todd over the years, I was surprised at Mayor Hodges' comments where she says you're going to be surprised at the word I use. I thought you were going to say funny. Because he really is. He's really an amusing guy who can come to a meeting, talk about assessments, and leave with the room laughing, which I think just says, we don't often have, I think, folks that we think of in this position who really have a personal touch with enjoying reaching out and working with the community. And I just really appreciate that you have that aspect to your ability to work with some residents who often are not feeling so great about the work that you do, and you come forward and you explain what you do, and you have fantastic staff. And I just want to say congratulations to you and your entire department for working through hard times, and I'm very happy to support your reappointment.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Oh, that's great. I would like to have the closing word on this appointment. Obviously, I'm very impressed with the work you've done and your staff. And we're just recently expanding this staff as actions we took just a week ago. So to really come out into the community and be a participant and a process and explanation is very welcome and an important aspect of the job that you perform. So all those in favor of the reappointment of Patrick Todd as city assessor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item is carried forward. Thank you very much, Patrick. Okay, the next public hearing and appointment consideration we'll have is Ms. Susan Siegel as appointed position of city attorney. I also would welcome Mayor Hodges to introduce this item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I am honored again to put forward the name of Susan Siegel for city attorney. Very proud to put that name forward. I have worked with her for not the last 8 years, but I think the last 6 or 7 here at the city, and have been just so impressed with the quality of her work, not just doing the work of, civil litigation and criminal, but also proactive work on behalf of the city, creating programs that are standards nationwide. We are, on the civil side, we are the best law firm in town. We have the best record in court. We have the best record overall of any law firm in town. I would put us up against anybody, and that is due to Susan's leadership and her ability to make that happen and make that real. Her work on the pension issue, which is near and dear to my heart and to the folks who pay taxes in Minneapolis, was crucial to our success on that issue. And ranked choice voting as well. There were some folks who were not a fan of ranked choice voting, and Susan helped lead the way to make sure it was the process that we could use in the city, and she supported that work. On the criminal side, this is one of the places where her vision has come forward. The Downtown 100 program, the partnership across so many different lines to work to address some of the livability crime issues that were being committed, the top 100 livability crime offenders. We really focused on that in a way that was across government, across with our partners in philanthropy, with our partners in nonprofit world, and livability crimes went down, I think, 70% each year. They have been going down as we have focused on that. And that is a nationwide model. Folks ask us how we did that, and Susan Siegel led that work, as well as our domestic violence prosecution partnership, which has helped reduce domestic violence in the city, but has also increased successful prosecution of domestic violence offenders. Again, building partnerships across line to make this make this the Minnesota model, make this a nationwide model for how we work as a city. Diversion programs. We didn't have diversion programs here in the city until Ms. Siegel helped lead the way on creating those for driver's license offenses, et cetera. Keeping people out of that system and out of that churning has been crucial. And these are all foundations of the equity work that we want to do at the city. Susan Siegel has been one of the leaders of this. The city attorney's office has been one of the keepers of our equity work at the city, quietly but truly here in the city. And Ms. Siegel has the respect of her colleagues. You will see in your packet that the Ramsey County Attorney, the St. Paul City Attorney, the Hennepin County Attorney, and Senator Klobuchar have all submitted letters in support. She just won the Minnesota Attorney of the Year from Minnesota Lawyer. She just won Attorney of the Year from Minnesota Lawyer and the Myra Bradwell Award from the Minnesota Women's Lawyer. She has the respect of her colleagues around the state and here in the Twin Cities. And finally, I would say that I trust Susan Siegel. I will put on the table, I know that the opinion she rendered regarding the stadium was controversial and that a lot of people didn't like it. I was an opponent of the stadium, and I will say I didn't like it. But here's the deal. I don't always like the advice of my attorney, but I always trust the advice of my attorney. There's been more than one decision, more than one opinion rendered that I did not like, but I always trust that opinion from Susan Siegel. And so I am putting her name forward without reservation and with great pride, and I ask that you reappoint her as our city attorney.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hodges, for that appointment and introduction, so we can kind of get this in front of us. What I'd like to do is we're going to have a public hearing, and if you've been invited to or you have signed up to have your voice heard, I'll be kind of limiting the conversations to about 2 minutes per person. We'd like you to introduce yourself, give us your address for the record. And if you haven't signed in yet and would like to speak, I invite you to check in with the city clerk. But I'll be taking them in order of the sign-ins. And at the conclusion of the public hearing is then we'll have a committee discussion about the appointment. So that being the kind of housekeeping details of the process, I think I'll call our first person who signed up is Lee Roper-Betker. Thank you. If you could join us. Ms. Arthur, you will be up right after that. So if you could take your spot in line, we can keep this moving. So again, we'll try to keep it to 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair
Welcome.
Quincy. Thank you, council members. My name is Lee Roper-Batker, and I'm the president and CEO of the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. And it's my pleasure to be here today to speak in support of Susan Siegel's reappointment as our city attorney. And I'm going to tell you a quick story about why I think she should be reappointed. And I first met Susan about 5 years ago when she called me into her office, and she called me in to talk about the growing problem of child sex trafficking in our community. And she described that she was seeing more and more girls being picked up who were victims of sex trafficking, and we were criminalizing them. We were putting them into the system, and we were not treating them like the victims they were. And she leaned across the table and she said, "So, what's the Women's Foundation of Minnesota going to do about this?" And I think that's part of Susan's hallmark, is her ability to identify complex emerging issues in our community and bring the right people together to solve them. And she was really the impetus for our Minnesota Girls Are Not for Sale campaign. And in just 3 short years, we've passed the safe harbor in Minnesota. So we now have that housing and treatment in place. We've said that any child who's a victim of sex trafficking is in fact a victim and will not be criminalized. And we've provided training, and we're looking at the demand side, working with law enforcement. So I think this is a very comprehensive example of Susan's leadership to solve a pressing community problem. Not only that, she's been with us out to Washington, D.C., and was instrumental in our meetings with Senator Klobuchar to have national legislation introduced that's based on the Minnesota Safe Harbor model. So for all those reasons, I support and encourage her reappointment as our city attorney.
Thank you very much for your comments. You've finished with 3 extra seconds, so thank you for that.
Woohoo!
Ms. Arthur, please join.
Fantastic. Do I get those 3 extra
Nope,
seconds?
they're done. They're gone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. My name is Carol Arthur. I'm the Executive Director of the Domestic Abuse Project. We're located at 204 West Franklin here in Minneapolis, also at North Point, at Little Earth, and in the Public Service Center. I'm here to speak in favor of the reappointment of Susan Siegel as Minneapolis City Attorney. As a nonprofit partner with the City of Minneapolis in reducing the domestic assault incidences in our city, I would like to highlight some major accomplishments of the City Attorney's Office under Susan Siegel's leadership. City Attorney Siegel has prioritized the aggressive prosecution of domestic assault cases. This seems appropriate, like a no-brainer, since domestic assault cases are one of the largest volume criminal cases the city prosecutes, but this hasn't always been the historical path. In pursuit of that goal, her office is committed to community partnerships and collaboration with local nonprofits, community members, other city departments, and Hennepin County. We have all been at the table to contribute ideas to her department business plan, and we all have a role in implementing it. Since Susan Siegel's appointment in 2008, her office has worked closely with the Minneapolis Police Department to train every officer in our city in evidence-based prosecution, meaning gathering evidence at the scene, interviewing the victim, suspect, and any witnesses, taking pictures of injuries and property damage, asking the victim's question to find out about the risk of escalating danger. The work together between the Minneapolis Police Department, City Attorney's Office, and others has resulted in a conviction rate that historically had been around 48% to the current conviction rate that's 70% or better, typically over the last few years. It has also resulted in a reduction in 911 calls. I believe this is because of the repeat offenders are no longer repeat offenders. We're getting them. And that was also based on an initiative by the City Attorney's Office of identifying those repeat offenders and having a list at the jail so officers could review that list and charge the person at the appropriate level. They now have that in their squad car so they can review it. However, in addition to aggressive prosecution of domestic assault cases and holding the abusive person responsible for stopping the violence, the City Attorney's Office has partnered with the Domestic Abuse Project, Casa de Esperanza, Asian Women United, to ensure that victims of those domestic cases get the support, safety planning, and long-term help they need to be safe and make decisions for themselves and their families.
Ms. Arthur, just, you're over your time.
All right.
If you can wrap it.
The final thing I want to say is this allows us to reach out to victims proactively in English, Spanish, Somali, Oromo, Swahili, Arabic, Hmong, Cambodian, Lao, and any other language we need. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Knapp, I think you'll be followed by Mr. Ziegler, so I just wanted to give everybody a heads up.
Chair
Please.
Quincy, council members, thank you. My name is Peter Knapp. I'm a professor at William Mitchell College of Law, where I also serve as director of the clinical programs. About half my work with the college is working with students who are representing clients who can't afford attorneys. But one of my other areas of interest is the Minnesota Supreme Court, and that's what brings me here this afternoon. Across the course of the last several years, I've had dozens of conversations with Susan Siegel about recent developments in Minnesota law. 3 things have impressed me. First, the depth and breadth of her knowledge about Minnesota law. Whether the matter is criminal, civil, or administrative, she's shown an astonishing, almost encyclopedic familiarity with Minnesota law. Second, the balanced judgment she's brought to those discussions. I've often come into the room pretty sure that the opinion was either right or wrong, and she was often able to make me see nuances that I had missed. And third, her intuitive grasp of the practical impact of those decisions, something, frankly, I'll confess, law professors struggle with. I've profited from those discussions, and I want to give you just one example of something that I watched her do that I thought was truly amazing. I helped prepare her for her Supreme Court argument in the instant runoff voting case, Minnesota Voters Alliance. It was an amazing display. I had fully expected her to be in firm command of Minnesota precedent. Indeed, she was. But she also demonstrated comfort and ease and intelligence in discussing issues that ranged from the applicability of the precedential value of Bush versus Gore to Kenneth Arrow's theorem on monotonicity, a word I could barely even pronounce, but she seemed to sail right past. It was an amazing display. What made it more amazing was the insight she demonstrated in framing those issues so that she could get a favorable result from the Minnesota Supreme Court. And indeed, that's what happened. In a court that had justices ranging in opinion and perspective from Magnuson to Anderson, she was able to deliver a unanimous decision. I urge her reappointment.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you. A law professor, just a few seconds over time.
It's pretty good for us.
That's not bad. Mr. Ziegler, welcome.
I'm Petuashte. My name is Bill Ziegler. I'm president and CEO of Little Earth of Nye Tribes in South Minneapolis. Mr. Chair, council members, thank you for taking the time to listen to us. I've been on the job at Little Earth now for a decade, and when I came into the city from my reservation in South Dakota, I knew that the first thing I needed to do was help stabilize my community. And I realized that Little Earth is the largest concentration of American Indian people in any city in this country. It is right here in South Minneapolis. It's in your city. So I had to stabilize the community. I had to take us, we were in free fall, and there's a lot of things that we did to try to gain some semblance of stability, and we did that work. And then after we were able to stabilize the community in some way, we knew that the first thing we needed to then was to seek a new vision for Little Earth, to seek a new vision for our community. And we did that work. That's all internal work that we needed to do as a community. So there's three things that happened after we sought out this vision for our community, and what I'm trying to share with you is how integral the city attorney's office was in this process. First and foremost, in the stabilization of our community. The city attorney has been a huge partner with us in our court watch program, making sure that we had the ability to dictate who was allowed within our own community. They've been huge in that aspect for us. The second part of our process of change and moving forward was providing opportunity. Could we truly say we're providing opportunity within our community to make a better life for our community members? The city attorney's office has been instrumental in guiding us in that process. The third thing is accountability. The city attorney's office has been right there beside us and making sure that we had the tools necessary to hold people accountable when they were in our community. But the most important thing that I think they bring to the table for us is a basic understanding of relationship in the American Indian community and how important that is to us. Long and short of it is I fully support Susan Siegel's reappointment of city attorney, and frankly, I think it'd be a mistake if y'all don't do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I'd like to say Commissioner Dorfman, but I don't get to say that anymore. Ms. Dorfman, if you could join us.
Thank you.
And Monica Nielsen, you'll be right up next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Quincy and Mayor Hodges and members of the committee. I am here as the Executive Director of St. Stephen's Human Services, a job that I began this morning. But I wanted to come and say a few words about Susan Siegel, who I have known since 1988, when her wonderful mother and State Representative Gloria Siegel called me and asked me to run for office. And I have worked with Susan in many capacities over the years. Certainly she's been a statewide leader in mental health reform in her capacity as the Assistant County Attorney under County Attorney Klobuchar, and certainly as the City Attorney. Susan has made a huge difference on helping people who have mental illness get access to the care they need and to help reduce the stigma that so often gets in the way of them getting that care, and has been hugely instrumental in making sure that law enforcement, both here at the the city and at the county get the training they need to know how to best deal with people who are experiencing crisis. Heading Home Hennepin, Susan Siegel in the City Attorney's Office has been a great partner, and Susan gets that for people who are experiencing homelessness, that the answer to maintaining public safety is not to arrest people over and over and over again for livability crimes, but to really help them get connected to the services they need. And as a result, as the mayor mentioned, livability crimes have gone down, and people with no permanent address have been arrested in much fewer numbers. And lastly, as Lee mentioned from the Women's Foundation, over the last year in partnership with Councilmember Glidden and the Women's Foundation and working with the City Attorney's Office, we have begun to build a partnership to combat juvenile sex trafficking in our community, both in Minneapolis and in Hennepin County. And Susan has been instrumental in helping me at the county develop our Hennepin County No Wrong Door plan. So for kids who are coming into county systems who have been exploited, instead of sending them back out to those who would abuse and misuse them even more, we are now establishing a system in place to make sure they get connected to what they need, which passed the county board and committee last Tuesday. So thank you very much for this opportunity to speak in favor of Susan. She's a good lawyer with a social justice heart, a real win-win for the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Nilsson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members, and Mayor Hodges. My name is Monica Nilsson, and I work at St. Stephen's Human Services, 2309 Nicollet Avenue in Minneapolis. It is my privilege to speak in support of Susan Siegel being reappointed as city attorney. I am not a lawyer, and so in fact, I believe I provide a perspective from someone who is more representative of those who work and live in Minneapolis, who seeks a leader in this role. I am an advocate for people who experience homelessness, and I have collaborated with Susan in our work with the Downtown 100, an initiative she has led to address issues with men and women who have multiple contacts with our courts. If we can work towards a vision that the general public and those who use the court system will refer to it as accessible, fair, consistent, responsive, free of discrimination, independent, and well-managed, we are doing well. Please allow me to share just my experience with Ms. Siegel and how she exemplifies these traits. For those of us who work with the City Attorney's Office, the courts, and the individuals we serve, justice can feel elusive, biased, and removed. For Minneapolis residents without financial means or connections or support, and who are living with the barriers of mental illness and isolation from the mainstream, Ms. Siegel created a model where my clients were met with the very traits I mentioned. Ms. Siegel has created an environment which balances the safety of the community with a long-term solution for our clients to reduce recidivism. While her career is remarkable, it's what's not listed on her resume that also impresses me. She has walked the streets with me to better learn how issues appearing before the courts could be improved, not only for the client, but for our improved economic development. I encourage you to support her in reappointment.
Thank you very much. Let's see, I have Ed Anderson, followed by David Lohr. Mr. Anderson, welcome.
Thank you very much. Ed Anderson, Cub Foods. I'm at 2850 26th Avenue South. I'm a grocer.
Yeah.
I used to work at Cub Foods in North Minneapolis and had the pleasure of working with Susan, and we had a lot of issues with livability crimes. Susan partnered with both council members, City of Minneapolis Police Department, Hennepin County Attorney's Social Services, and did the right thing. She plays well with others, and she brought all of these people together, and we actually saw the livability crimes go down, and that is also very good for business. Please support total.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lohr, forgive the interruption. I'm sorry?
I was here for a consent agenda.
Oh, okay. Well, you missed it. It's all the good theater. And then we'll skip to the next on the list. Let's see if I can. I have Mr. Turchik, Chuck Turchik. Again, just want to remind folks of 2 minutes, if we could wrap that up in that time frame. And if there's additional people that wanted to sign up, please check in with the clerk. Mr. Turchik,
Hi,
thank you.
Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Chuck Turchik. I live at 2112 Portland Avenue in Minneapolis. You've heard all sorts of plaudits of City Attorney Siegel. I only follow a couple issues in the city for the last couple of years, and in both of those areas I have some questions. I sent you a couple emails with some suggested questions, and I sent you one this morning that you may not have received, and I left copies of that email with the clerk. First of all, I have one additional comment about the stadium issue. I attended one of Mayor Rybeck's community forums about the stadium, and upon entering the room, I received from one of his aides an informational handout about the proposal. At least 3 times in that document, reference was made to the city contribution to the stadium project. Subsequently, we found out from the city attorney that these were not city resources that would be used. So it seemed Minneapolis to be making a city contribution without using city resources. Well, wow, you're the budget committee. You have to find out how that's done. You will have solved the city's budgetary problem forever. In my first email to you regarding the Civilian Review Authority ordinance, I didn't include specific questions, so in my email this morning I did include them. I'd like to just repeat those questions here. These are questions I think that have not been asked by any committee in the City Council to date. 1, when Chief Dolan wrote that he was basing his disciplinary decisions on his disagreement with the adjudicated facts as determined by the CRA board, was that consistent with ordinance wording that, quote, the chief's disciplinary decisions shall be based on the adjudicated facts as determined by the Civilian Review Authority board? 2, was it the city attorney's interpretation of that ordinance that the based on adjudicated facts provision had to be read in conjunction with the next phrase, which said, and shall not include an overview of the facts? And that this sentence taken as a whole simply meant the chief of the Minneapolis Police Department could not do a brand new investigation.
Mr. Turchik, I hate to interrupt you at this point, but you're about 2 seconds left on the time, and I know you're going to have some other points to make, but I wonder if we could stick to the topic of Susan Siegel's appointment, and if you could wrap up as quickly as you can.
I thought she's the legal advisor.
I'm not debating that question with you.
I was questioning her
just
legal
want to make
advice.
sure you just wrap up in the next
Okay.
few seconds. Thank you.
Then I would suggest you ask her if she's familiar with the rule against surplusage, a statutory interpretation rule, and doesn't her interpretation violate that rule? And if it does, I would suggest you ask her real reason for giving you that legal advice. I don't see why legal advice doesn't go precisely to her qualifications. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Levinson, followed by Mr. Schultz. Ms. Levinson.
Good afternoon, Chair Quincy and council members. Thank you. I am here as a student.
I'm sorry. Could you just offer your address for the record?
Yes, I live at 33 Hamlin Avenue South in St. Paul. And I'm here today as a student intern representing community organization Communities United Against Police Brutality in South Minneapolis. And I would like to present to you a letter that has been signed by our president, Michelle Gross, and our vice president, Daryl Robinson, opposing the reappointment of Attorney Siegel. Communities United Against Police Brutality was established in 2000 to provide a voice for people dealing with the effects of police brutality and to ensure accountability of police to the community. We have engaged in extensive efforts to change the underlying policies and practices that promote police brutality and misconduct. We write to oppose the reappointment of Susan Siegel to the position of Minneapolis City Attorney. We consider her tenure to be highly problematic as she has failed in her responsibilities and does not warrant reappointment. Ms. Siegel's actions as city attorney include improperly restricting access to government data, and for further reference, please see CUAPB versus City of Minneapolis and Minneapolis Police Federation, as well as CUAPB versus City of Minneapolis. In both instances, the city attorney advanced novel interpretations of the Minnesota Data Practices Act, Chapter 13, in such a way as to deny access to what was later proven in court to be public data. Community organizations such as CUAPB should not have to sue the city in order to effectuate our rights to public data. Under Ms. Siegel's stewardship, the city attorney's office engages in a scorched earth practice of prosecuting those who have experienced police brutality as a means of limiting the potential for civil liability suits. At the same time, her office has refused to prosecute police who brutalize and harm the community, adding to a failure of the city to hold police accountable and protect the public. Despite this, a number of people have successfully sued the city for police misconduct incidents, costing the city over $20 million in the past 7 years. Under Ms. Siegel's watch, numerous activists have been prosecuted for engaging in First Amendment protected activities. One such individual was arrested for simply sitting and drinking coffee, and it would appear to us under this that his only crime was being American Indian. Other examples include the prosecution of an individual for chalking on the sidewalk and the clearing of PV Plaza of all community activists.
And Ms. Levinson, if you could just wrap up really quickly, I appreciate it.
Yep. We see Ms. Siegel's reappointment as a disservice to the residents of Minneapolis and the Minneapolis community, and we would like to oppose her reappointment at this time.
Thank you very much for your comments. If you had any written letter that you'd like to submit it as part of the record, I invite you to pass that on to the city clerk. Thank you. Mr. Schultz, did you also want to join that?
So my name's Eric Schultz. I'm also a member of Communities United Against Police Brutality, and I'm a university student at the University of Minnesota. I live at 326 6th Avenue Southeast in Marcy Holmes neighborhood. And so basically, just to kind of wrap up why we're very strongly urging you to oppose this reappointment of Susan Siegel, I just want to say that there's a couple things that the city attorney seems to be really good at here in Minneapolis. And those things are getting brutal cops who beat and kill off the hook and making sure that they stay in the community harming people. 2, making sure that victims of police brutality are criminalized with bogus laws such as the False Reporting Act as a mechanism to delegitimize their complaints against Minneapolis police officers, and for decreasing government transparency by denying public data to community groups such as Communities United Against Police Brutality. And I have to say, too, I've been living in Minneapolis for 3 years now, and I'm absolutely appalled by the scope of police brutality in the city. I've worked very closely with people who've been brutalized by Minneapolis police officers and with family members who've lost their loved ones due to Minneapolis police officer misconduct. And I have to say, I think this is a very dangerous and insulting reappointment. It would signify a huge blow to communities that receive lots of brutality at the hands of Minneapolis police. And I do not understand how this can be an honor to reappoint somebody who has been complicit with all this misconduct. So I would like to oppose Mrs. Siegel's reappointment. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Mr. Bicking, followed by Janet Nye after this. So, Mr. Bicking, welcome.
Hi, I'm Dave Bicking, 4200 Cedar Avenue South. I agree with all the excellent points made in the letters that have come to you from the National Lawyers Guild, Communities United Against Police Brutality, Chuck Turchik, and Council Member Gordon. The issues those letters raise remind me of a quote from Eugene Debs, quote, "The class which has the power to rob upon a large scale has also the power to control the government and legalize their robbery." In the case of the Viking Stadium, that was definitely the role of the city attorney. The city attorney, as she advises the mayor and council, should nevertheless also represent the interests of the people of Minneapolis. Her advice should be fair and in accordance with the law, the city charter, and the Constitution. In that role, Susan Siegel has failed miserably, and she should lose her position. But that alone will not solve the problems with the city attorney's office. Susan Siegel has been acting as she has been told to by the mayor and by the city council. Her role has been more similar to that of a lawyer for the mafia. She has not been asked what is right and just and legal. She has been asked, what can we get away with and how can we do it? I won't excuse Susan Siegel for her violations of her responsibilities as a lawyer or her violations of the responsibilities to the public. But the problem lies deeper, and it requires a change in the directions given to our new city attorney. Do you really want to know what is legal and constitutional? Or do you want to know how to evade the law and accomplish what you really want to do? There is a very recent example of the City Council's abdication of its responsibilities. Recently, you passed a resolution establishing clean zones to benefit Major League Baseball during the All-Star Game. Sections of this resolution are blatantly unconstitutional, especially in regards to demonstration permits or even signs on people's own property, both prohibited except with the prior approval of Major League Baseball. Even if you couldn't figure that out yourselves, you received a very clear letter from the ACLU prior to your vote. The city will be sued, and the city will lose, and this is partly your responsibility and partly the responsibility of the city attorney. Did you even ask the city attorney about this, and why not? I presume the attorney was consulted before the contract was signed several years ago. How could she approve this? Even with the contract, you didn't have to pass that resolution. Unconstitutional provisions of contracts are void. It is not just the city attorney. You are all complicit in these violations of the Constitution and evasions of the law, all for the venal purpose of serving the corporations and that class which robs us upon a large scale.
Okay, Mr.
Please
Griffin.
start down a better path by denying the reappointment of Susan Siegel. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Janet Nye, followed by Kimberly Spates.
My name is Janet Nye, and I live at 4200 Cedar Avenue South. And although I'm wearing an Occupy patch, I don't represent Occupy, but I do concur with their desire for more democracy in a climate of increasing repression. It's becoming more and more apparent that our city government has small regard for the Constitution and the city charter. In smaller matters where citizens are out of the loop, too busy to attend meetings, or perhaps not completely aware of the finer points of conducting governmental business legally, little attention seems to be paid to proper procedure to ensure maximum democracy. This is a responsibility of the city attorney's office. The scrupulous attention to detail to keep data access open while still protecting privacy has been abused, as we have seen with the Vikings deal. Government seems to be leaning heavily toward the public relations solution, or happy talk, as a friend of mine refers to it, the constant self-congratulation of government officials and basic stonewalling when it comes to accountability. This isn't working, and our city is continuing to decline. Susan Siegel has been exposed as a yes woman to the wealthy power brokers who run Minneapolis. I leave you with a quote from one with an inside view on city government. Peter Wagenius, right-hand man of former Mayor R.T. Ryback, stated, "And we all know the city attorney's opinions are whatever the mayor wants them to be." Thank you, Mr. Wagenius, for a rare moment of honesty from one of the powerful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just going to work this out. Ms. Spates, followed by some guy I used to know, Don Samuels. Is he around? Good. Ms. Spates,
Good
thank you for joining
afternoon.
us.
Thank you, Chair Quincy and members of the committee, and to Mayor Hodges. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm here today to support the reappointment of Susan Siegel to the City Attorney's Office. I had the pleasure to work with Susan while she was a county attorney over at Hennepin County. We had a very good working relationship. Like Mayor Hodges said, you might not always like the advice that she provides, but you know that she has done her homework and that she's looked at every possible way to do the best she can for her clients. I also had the opportunity to work with her as the chair of Restorative Justice Community Action when we were looking for ways to expand the use of restorative justice for livability crimes, and she was very instrumental in assisting us as well as others who did not have the access that we had to the programs and the funding at the city to expand our reach. So, you know, if you're not doing your job, if people aren't asking questions, if people aren't questioning you about what you're doing, you're not doing a good job. And I can say today, by the comments that have been made, that Susan has been able to withstand the negative, positive, and all of that. And if you all take the time to get to know her, to review her record, you know that this is a good appointment. So I encourage you to reappoint her as city attorney, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Samuels.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. It's great to see you. And great to see the entire committee and 4 new faces on this committee. And want to give a shout out to our new mayor and congratulate you on the meeting you're hearing today on the reappointment of Susan Siegel. I feel that the city is in good hands in so many fronts, both in your hands and in the hands of the incredible staff that is here and is being appointed and reappointed. I have great confidence sitting across from my TV on channel 72, I think it is, and watching you guys do your work, that the city is going to be moving forward well. And one of the ways that we're going to do that is by reappointing Susan. I could not resist the opportunity to come down here today to put in a good word for this well-deserved public servant. I've been on the council had been for 11 years. And in the latter half of that, Susan Siegel's service has been stellar as a city attorney for the city of Minneapolis. You're going to be in many closed-door sessions, and you're going to need advice on tough issues that could go either way. And you're not going to get any better advice on the pros and cons of each decision than you'll get from Susan Siegel. What an incredibly informed, intelligent, educated, compassionate, just, and ethical leader she is for the Minneapolis City Attorney's Office. I could not ask for more, and that my experience has been that she is utterly reliable. I'll give you a couple circumstances. One is we have a guy on the north side who sits in a wheelchair at the corner of Broadway and Lyndale, and he sells drugs from all of his body parts in his wheelchair. And he is violent. He lunges from his wheelchair without legs to attack people. This guy's out of his mind. All of us want to see him go down. And Susan brings the Downtown 100 practice to the north side, and this guy is medically assessed. It turns out he had an accident a few years ago before, and that he is mentally, neurologically flawed. And so instead of sending him to jail, he gets medical treatment and is now doing better, and the north side is doing a lot better. When we elect someone like Susan, that's the kind of compassionate service we're going to get with effectively leading towards a safer, better city. Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, we used to be much more generous on the time when I was in
I know. Yep. New sheriff in town, Skippy. Okay. Mr. Johnson, Tom Johnson. Welcome. I'll give you the extra time.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Tom Johnson, a happy resident of the 3rd Ward and a shareholder over at the Great Plant Moody Law Firm. As an attorney and as the city's attorney, Susan Siegel has 4 responsibilities, and these come right out of the Minnesota Rules of Professional Responsibility. As your advisor, she must provide you with an informed understanding of your legal rights and obligations and explain their practical implications. As your advocate, she's responsible for zealously asserting your interests under the rules of the adversary system. As a negotiator, she's responsible for seeking results that are advantageous to the city, consistent with the requirements of honest dealings toward others. And as an evaluator, she is responsible for examining the city's legal affairs and reporting about them to you and to others in a timely and clear manner. Now, I can illustrate all of those duties and how Susan exceptionally fulfills those duties in one case. And it's a duty that the mayor has already alluded to. It's the pension case. And it was a matter that I had the good fortune to be personally involved in, so my observations are firsthand. The city first challenged the propriety of the payments under the 2 pension plans before Susan's appointment to city attorney. But when Susan became city attorney, she took control of the city's representation, and did she take control? She soon realized that the city's complaint, did not seek the recovery of any overpayments, only an adjustment in the level of benefits going forward. I can remember well to this day when she came storming over to Great Plant Moody, Peter Ginder by her side, to meet with our pension attorneys. Isn't it possible, she asked, to frame the lawsuit so that the city is entitled to recover overpayments? The answer was yes. There's a well-established procedure. Susan took that advice back to you, and you accepted it. The lawsuit was altered, the court approved it, and ultimately successfully resolved through the legislative process. In short, Mr. Chair, if I were you, I would give Susan Siegel a big hug.
Thank you very much,
If you
Mr.
can't
Johnson.
do that, just vote for her reappointment.
Thank you. I think the final person on my sign-up sheet is Mr. Kushner. If there's additional folks, we'd be happy to have them sign up. But Mr. Kushner, you have the last word.
Thank you. I work at 431 South 7th Street, and my residence is in Golden Valley. I'm speaking on behalf of the National Lawyers Guild Minnesota chapter, an organization that's dedicated to doing legal work in furtherance of the principle that human rights should be more sacred than property rights. We did submit a letter, which we sent to all the members of the council, so I assume you read it, and so I shouldn't have to take more than 2 minutes. But in short, one of the things that I do in my work is I represent a lot of political activists who get arrested. I've represented hundreds over the 22 years that I practiced in Minneapolis. And so I've dealt with many city attorneys over the years, and I haven't, during the time that Ms. Siegel has been in office, I haven't dealt with prosecutors with as harsh a line towards political activists at any previous time. And the prosecutors always make it clear that they're getting their orders from above in these cases, that it's coming from their bosses. So they're following office policy. They have followed office policy in dictating much harsher consequences. We detailed some of the cases, but there was a particular case with people who were arrested in connection with the Occupy Homes movement, and they were just sitting down in front of a house, typical civil disobedience that warrants misdemeanor trespass charge or at most or something of that nature, and they all got, about a dozen of them got charged with gross misdemeanor charge of riot, much more serious charge. There was no basis for it whatsoever. It didn't go anywhere. In some cases, the judges threw them out. In other cases, they pled down to petty misdemeanors. But it was they were putting an inflammatory charge on activists for the purpose of intimidating them into trying to plead guilty, or just intimidating them in general. That was very disturbing. There was another specific case where I represented some people who were protesting for animal rights, and they were just chanting outside a store, and they got prosecuted, and they actually took the case to trial, charging them with a crime, and it got reversed by the Court of Appeals on the grounds of free speech. If I can just point out quickly, on the Viking Stadium, an issue that involved the city giving hundreds of millions of dollars to support wealthy people and big corporations, Ms. Siegel did not fulfill her professional responsibility. Instead of giving straightforward advice to the city council and the informative advice that at least talked about the controversialness of her position, she told the city council flat out a position that was untrue in order to fulfill the mayor's political agenda, which is specifically not what you want from a legal advisor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments and your opinions. Are there any additional people who would like to speak in front of the public hearing? Any other folks? Gone through the list of people. Final call. Okay. With that, I'd like to close the public hearing. And Councilmember Glidden.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move approval of this appointment, and I have some comments to make. Thank you very much. I am a very proud supporter of Susan Siegel, and I wanted to make a few remarks about why. I actually knew Susan before she was with the county attorney's office, before she was the city attorney for the city of Minneapolis. I knew her and knew of her when she was in private practice, and we were kind of, as you might say, on different sides of the aisle. I did plaintiff side work. She did more management side work. But from my perspective, myself and my partners always looked at Susan as someone that we just had a lot of respect for, as someone who was fair, someone who was reasonable, someone that we really trusted, that someone that I would refer cases to. And that was some qualities that I knew that she had before she came more into public life with the county attorney and then as our own city attorney. There's been a lot of great remarks, and it kind of got me remembering some different things that Susan has been involved with. Because I think not only does she bring these great qualities, because a lot of what the city attorney does, frankly, the public doesn't know about. She's behind the scenes. She's negotiating on behalf of the city. She's protecting the city's interests. She's giving advice to staff and to the electeds. She's doing so many things that are really behind the scenes. But there are some things that she does, in a sense, in front of the scenes, too, when we are more proactive as a city on certain matters. Certainly working on the pension case was an eye-opener to me as to, frankly, just how brilliant Susan Susan Siegel is. She revised our strategy in a way that put us in the best possible position to negotiate on this very important issue to the residents of the city of Minneapolis, and in a way that we are able to also provide some fairness to the pensioners and fairness to the residents, which was a very, very difficult balance. I was someone who was very involved in what we now call ranked choice voting, but instant runoff voting. And this was something that I think is a very critical and important reform to the city of Minneapolis. And again, Susan Siegel, it's really through her tenacity that we went all the way up to the Minnesota Supreme Court with, frankly, just like a slam dunk opinion in a way that I think if there had not been the tenacity of Susan in putting forward these strong legal arguments, we would not be in the position we are today with a strongly supported new voting system that others around the entire country look at us and our experiences, and now we're working more on implementation, not about the constitutionality. That's a very important thing. And I'm glad and I'm proud that we are doing that in the city of Minneapolis, and I want to thank Susan for her efforts to support that. Susan Siegel, I've worked with her on a lot of other issues. Our former commissioner, Gail Dorfman, St. Stephen's executive director, Gail Dorfman, mentioned sex trafficking. And this is just one example of how Susan is proactive, how I've never heard the story before about how she went to the Minneapolis Foundation and said, we need to do this together, but it doesn't surprise me in a sense. She looks at issues and she's able to think about the public good and how to move it forward. I am really honored to be able to be learning from Susan, and I just want to mention again, this is a woman who this year received an award as a Minnesota Attorney of the Year. She has the respect of her peers. She has the confidence of her peers. This is critical for us at the city of Minneapolis, that we have a city attorney who really has this kind of breadth, who commands the place that she leads, and with her talents and with her relationships, she is really a benefit, and we're lucky to have her at the city. Frankly, I'm surprised we've had her this long, and I support her wholeheartedly. Thank you, Susan, for putting yourself through this. I know that it's difficult.
Thank you for those comments. Are there additional comments from committee members? Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first comment is I heard a little bit earlier the disagreement about the clean zone, and I just wanted to say a few things about that, if I may. I would take Susan Siegel any day to defend that for us. So I will say that. But with regards to this specific appointment, I sat down with Susan last week, and I told her that I would spend the weekend reading the legal opinions from her, from the law firm Lockridge Grindle, and Judge Bush. And I'm a big concerned about that legal opinion. And first and foremost, the one thing that caught my attention was that Councilmember Cam Gordon on his blog post had mentioned that he had asked for an opinion early in January 2013. He didn't get a response until, I believe, sometime in April, and then the final decision came out in May. And I didn't understand why it took so long for the response to Councilmember Gordon to come to him. The second piece that concerned me is that, when I read the decision, I'm just perplexed as to how we created, or how the decision created a new definition for city resources when the city charter actually defined city resources as including sales tax and other taxes. And that just kind of was perplexing to me. And I think that when as a new council member, we don't have that much interaction with the city attorney's office, at least because we've only been here for 2 months. But it concerned me that the decision just, in my view, wasn't really grounded in law all that well. I certainly understand, the need for advocacy or the need to provide good opinion, but I was concerned about that, and so I just wanted to express that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say, like Blong, like Councilmember Yang, I spent the weekend considering this as well, looking over the opinions and the documents. I actually want to specifically thank my friend Samuel Savage and a couple other attorneys that sat down and reviewed everything with me. I think their advice was very helpful in considering this in coming up with some questions. So if it's okay with the chair, I would like to ask Mrs. Siegel some questions that I have that will help inform my opinion.
If that's acceptable to Ms. Siegel, I'd be happy to invite you up to address those questions.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Mrs. Siegel. And so, and I do have quite a few, so just keep that in mind. I guess maybe brevity with some of them would probably be best, just so I don't monopolize time here. And I also
I'm for that.
I also want to say that I like you, and I also think that you have done a lot of great work in general in the city. And so one of the things that I've wrestled with really is regarding this particular opinion on the referendum and the right to vote. So in addition to being accountable to the city council and the mayor, are you accountable to the residents of Minneapolis?
I believe that the city charter sets out my responsibilities, and I'd refer you to the city charter. The city attorney's office represents the mayor, its elected officials, and its boards and commissions, as well as the departments of the city, and that's my responsibility.
Okay. Was your legal opinion in the spirit of our city charter?
My legal opinion used my best legal judgment, considering all provisions of the city charter, as well as law, state constitutional law, of the authority of the legislature to give the city its authority and to take that authority away.
Do you believe the spirit of the city charter should have been honored?
That is not a decision for the city attorney to make. That is a political decision for the elected officials. The legislature saw fit to craft the stadium legislation in the manner that it did. And the city council, it's a special law, portions of it dealing with city sales taxes, and the city council had the right to vote for that or to vote against it. That is a political decision. My job is to provide the best legal advice possible based on the law, based on my 30 years of experience as a lawyer.
Was there any political pressure for your opinion to be written in a specific way?
The answer to that question is an emphatic no, and I do take a bit of umbrage with my integrity being questioned in this manner.
Yeah.
I have over 30 years of legal experience. I always use my best legal judgment, and my integrity is quite important to me.
Yeah, thank you, Madam or Ms. Siegel. I'm just questioning. I really didn't anticipate these kind of questions to be in a debate, cross-examining question. Could you maybe form a couple of them into one thought to kind of wrap things up? This is a little outside the debate of the.
Certainly. Well, I'm also wondering if you could address Mr. Gordon's concerns about the extensive delay in getting a legal opinion.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Johnson, I honestly don't remember any request by Councilmember Gordon for a written opinion. I, in our office, prides ourselves, and I actually exchanged glances with Peter Ginder, my civil deputy, to see if he recalled that. We pride ourselves on timely responses to our clients, which obviously includes council members.
Certainly. And then I was wondering if you could just respond to Judge Bush's opinion, just your interpretation of that.
I respectfully disagree with Judge Bush, and I believe that our opinion was correct, that the act of local approval did not violate the city charter. And in fact, Doug Mann, now in the Doug Mann lawsuit, his lawsuit has been dismissed by the district court, also dismissed by the Minnesota Court of Appeals.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms. Siegel, for
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Providing that response. Any additional comments or questions on Vice President Glidden's motion. I'd like to welcome Councilmember Fry to the committee. He's not a committee member, but obviously an interested party.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, I didn't see Councilmember Goodman in the back as well. Thank you. Did you have anything you'd like to offer?
No, I was just sitting in to hear all the testimony.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, with no more discussion amongst committee members, I'd like to continue to just call for that vote on final decision on the reappointment of Susan Siegel as city attorney. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item carries. With no further business to this committee, we are adjourned.